We are on our way to Machu Picchu, one of the great wonders of the world, according to some people. And we are first heading toward a town where we will stay all night, Aguas Calientes, hot waters. But of course, we mean hot springs, and that's how you would think of it in Spanish too. We will be taken by a guide to Machu Picchu, and then once we get to Machu Picchu, there will be a guide there who will give us a tour of that ancient summer getaway of the Inca Empire, the rulers. A getaway, just a place where the Inca rulers and several hundred people would come and spend time and grow gardens. You see those, all those terraces there, the green. Oh, that's good.
Yeah, I never even thought about how easy it would be to do panoramic with manual settings. Wow, that sun is... I almost wish now I'd worn my white long sleeve. I thought about it.
Luke, my son Luke, who does a lot of work with Max and Max things, he's talking about being up here in the mountains without a shirt. His arms aren't covered, his neck's not covered. And when you get up in the mountains, even when it's cool, because the air is thinner, you can get burned pretty fast. And so what started out as kind of cool, he's now feeling the heat. Didn't shoot too much video because really it's the kind of thing that you just need to see, because you know your eyes can see way to the side and way up and down much better than a camera can. People come from around the world to see these stones. They wonder, how in the world could people do this? They were able to channel water coming out of the ground, out of the side of the mountain, into stone things that they made. And somehow they were able to carve stones out of stones. Lots of stones, and they made these stones out of stones that were lying around on the mountain. It's amazing. And so people come here to be amazed. Every day, people from all around the world come. And so you hear all kinds of languages. And there's a guide. That's our guide. Now I want to tell you about him. He's a descendant of the Inca Empire, and while he was talking to a group of people I was with, I mean, his skin was very different, and he had a certain accent. He spoke Spanish, but he was obviously of the ancient people. And so he told everybody his name, but he said it was Cristal. You know, like the English word crystal. While people were looking around a little bit, not paying attention to him, I said to him in Spanish, "Did you change your name?" And he said, "Maybe." And then I knew that he was a real Quechua, because you see, I could tell that he wasn't proud of changing his name. I knew then that if he answered me like that, then we could probably talk some more. And so as we walked along, they say that this is a royal bathroom. Well, anyway, as we walked around, he began to open up to me. What you're seeing here is an Inca flag up there on the mountain.
It's all right.
As we walked along, he told me more things about himself. He told about being a Quechua in a modern day. He changed his clothing to, to match his surroundings, because he used to live up in the Highlands, like the places I showed you on those farms. And, he lived that kind of life. He didn't just live there, but he raised crops with the people, and eventually he moved to the city to get reliable work. And yet he didn't want to give up who he was, a descendant of the Incas, un andino, a man of the mountains. So he told me how he did wear the kind of clothing that allowed him to fit into the people where he worked, which is sensible. But when he went home, he had another way of living. It was a simpler way. Eventually, he had some technology in his home. He had a television, and I forget what else he said, some kind of a stereo system. But he always remembered where he came from, because that's what he really was. That's who he really was. He told me how younger guides will come, and they're Quechua too, and he said you can look at them and see that they don't have the Quechua tradition in them. It's not in their minds. And he says you can look at their clothing. He says it's not in their clothing. He says you look at their shoes. He says you can tell. They may be Quechua, but they're not Quechua in their hearts anymore. Not just by the way they dress, but by the way they think and talk. So you see, that's what happens over time. People change. And that has happened in my family. And maybe you ought to talk to your parents and grandparents and see how it's happened in yours. Long ago, my mother, who lived during the days of the Great Depression, would stand in lines here in Indianapolis, Indiana, stand in bread lines. That's what they called them. They'd stand in bread lines and wait for a loaf of bread to be handed out by some, government department. Because times are so hard, and a whole lot of people just didn't have a lot of food. So they would stand in line and, wait for a loaf of bread. Well, there were 11 people in my mother's family. Later, she had 11 children, so we were 13. But anyway, she passed on a simple lifestyle, and, it's what I grew up with. And to this day, I can still eat the kind of food I ate when I grew up, and I'm fine with it. 2 slices of white bread with some Miracle Whip on it and a piece of lettuce. Do my kids eat like that? No. Times have changed. But you see, I'm like this Cristal guy. I still hold on to part of my past, and to me, it's a beautiful memory. Also, if I get to eat a sandwich with a slice of bologna with Miracle Whip on it, if the bologna is cut thin, and I've got white bread there, that's really good too. I think it's really good. But if I fry that bologna, I put a piece of it in the skillet, then it starts to bubble up in the middle real big, and then I take a knife and I cut it from the center out. And then it lies down almost flat, and then it can fry. I flip it over, fry it a little more, put it on those 2 pieces of white bread with Miracle Whip on it, or some mustard, and all the memories of childhood come up. And I think of the days when my mother, I wasn't born yet, but I think of her standing in line, in a long line in Indianapolis, Indiana, waiting for a loaf of bread. Were those good times? No, those weren't good times for her. Those were hard times. But the kind of simple eating that she learned to do in her family. I mean, we ate some weird German food too, and I always thought it was normal. I don't mean just normal. I mean, I just thought it was typical that everybody did that. But I found out that's not what everybody did at all. So there was some German mixed in with just things, simple things that come out of going through the Great Depression. However, there are younger people there who hold on to their identity, and they're just like him. They are Quechua at heart. They are descendants of the Inca. They're very proud of it, and it's a lot of fun to talk with them. And there's Luke with his wife, Stephanie, who speaks Spanish. Find out who you are, and be as proud as these descendants of the Inca. Some of them are your age.